So you said it right. The market's a bit dry to a certain degree. And dry, I'm going to say on volume of transactions, not necessarily in dollars of transactions, right? I think that people are being a bit more cautious on what transactions they get into. Due diligence are becoming a little bit more rigorous, which that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think 3, 4 years ago, when the market had really boomed in M&A, at some point it became almost crazy on what we were trading on, right? So due diligence have actually gotten more rigorous, but that's a good thing. And I think companies need to evaluate whether it makes sense and what am I really buying into, right? But I think in terms of recommendation, I think people are a little bit hesitant right now because there is a lot of market uncertainty and there's a lot of volatility. But I do think that there's people sitting and waiting and thinking that that's gonna sort of settle out a little bit heading into fourth quarter of this year, and are going to start seeing a little bit more uptick in transactions. Probably not quarter four, but maybe quarter one of 2026.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Podcast, filled with marketing and leadership tips on launching and growing your business with your host, Deanne Mora.
If you're looking for in-the-trenches ideas on how to grow your law firm or curious about what's happening within M&A and startup funding these days, this is the episode for you. I'm joined today by Moises Saltiel, managing partner of Saltiel Law Group. He has over 10 years of experience in corporate law, M&A, and private equity. His specialty is in advising foreign clients entering the U.S. via investment and engaging in cross-border transactions. He's grown his firm from solo to mid-sized with over 10 offices in Miami and Spain. And today, we'll get more of the behind-the-scenes view of how we did it. Moises, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Deanne. Pleasure to be here.
A pleasure to have you. So let's start with your founder story. So you started truly the American dream, really. I mean, you started as a solo and you've grown your firm into a global brand. You have a strategic alliance. Talk to me about that. How did you evolve to where you are today?
Yeah, it's thank you for giving me the space, and happy to expand on it. It just sort of was a little bit shocking when you were reading it, and I was sort of thinking, is that us or who is that, right? It sort of still seems surreal sometimes, right?
I can
So
imagine.
for us, I mean, I started the practice right 7 years ago, and the funny part about it, as I was reflecting on that question, is all I do is advise businesses, right? Whether they're mature businesses or they're startup businesses, and kind of how to go from the beginning stages to through the growth, right? And it's funny because when I started the practice, I never really saw it as a business, right? I think I came from practicing as an attorney for another firm, right? For somebody else. It wasn't my business. I was so used to measuring my time on billable hours and the legal work that I'm putting out there. And when I started my practice, I guess I still really felt like I was just more in lawyer mentality, right? I was a solo practitioner, then hired my first paralegal and first associate, but I was really much, my identity was me as a lawyer. And now I look back on 7 years from then, and I have a completely different mentality where I look at the organization as just that, a business organization. In fact, I look at myself very little as a lawyer, and I look at myself more as how do I help the organization put the right strategies in place and how to grow, right? So I think that's been part of the journey, has also been that mind shift of we're a business that happens to provide legal services. And that mind shift is what really helped the business grow. So it was about year 4, more or less, that I stopped thinking of it as a legal practice itself. And I started thinking as we're a business that provides solutions to people's problems, right? Or solutions to people that are looking for ways of how to grow, how to structure their business, how to better protect their business. Our solutions just happen to be within the legal industry. And I think when that mind shift came about is when we started adding people to the organization that were specialists in particular areas that we needed to serve our clientele. And I think that's how we've managed the growth. And like you said, it's gone from a solo practice to a more small but mid-sized office, to now we became part of a international law firm called The Hassle, and we are their first US office and taking charge of the US expansion for the organization. So we have really gone from a solo practice to now being part of a mid-size law firm, international law firm looking to continue to expand. That's surreal.
No, and I think that that's the idea of shifting the mindset from, I am a professional and, in your case, an attorney, but it parallels a lot of founders, I think, who, you get into business and you're doing your thing and it's almost like a job in a sense. And then
Mhm.
suddenly at some point you hopefully have the epiphany where you realize, wait a second, my job here is to actually structure the company and not necessarily to be the delivery person. So how challenging of a mindset shift was that? Did you just wake up one day and say, wait a second, or did you have mentors, or like how did you come to that point?
Yeah. Well, I want to say, right, that in fairness and giving credit to the people that mentor me, I had mentors and I had people that were advising me like these changes are coming and what are we going to do to get ready for it. But as I think, as most entrepreneurs will tell you, it was some of the rough lessons of all of a sudden the business is growing and you are used to managing every aspect of it, and now you got to start, delegating and trusting other people to have this, to be aligned in your interest and your vision of the firm. And that's really how you're going to grow, not by micromanaging and holding on to it, to everything. But that's also a hard thing to do or to come by on its own, right? To sort of start letting go of the vibe grade, if you will. So
Yeah.
yes, I want to tell you that it was all rosy and my advisors told me ahead of time and I was very strategic about it. But the reality is there were days that I was, burning the midnight oil and working till late because my entire day was occupied with management and business development, and therefore at night I had to really do the legal work because I had to come through for my clients, and I probably waited until way too long or too late to really figure out I should be hiring more people sooner to help me provide a very effective service and not have to kill myself in the process. So it was a
Right.
little bit of a trial and error. And then once you hire those first few people and you see that it starts working, then you say, huh, this is, I could have
This
done
is
that,
onto
a
something.
year
Yeah.
ago, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, entrepreneurship's a little messy, and I don't think you'll speak to any successful entrepreneur who won't tell you that they've done more than their fair share of burning the midnight oil. But I'm interested. So part of your growth, you obviously you grew organically initially, and then you entered into the strategic alliance. So talk to us more about that, and what is that something that you recommend to business owners when they want to really jump to the next level? How does that fit into a strategy?
Yeah, this strategic partnership has taught me a lot. And I still think I'm learning from it, right? And again, going back to the mindset of starting the business and then becoming an organization, and then now my mindset about how we look at growth, right? I think it's, we must not need to go about it by ourselves, right, or alone. And I think that's sort of the mind shift that has taken place with this strategic partnership. And this was a Hassel had its own tradition, and it's been a law firm in Spain for 40 years. They hit the 40-year mark last year, right? And we were already in somewhat of a referral alliance, right? Where they were the firm of reference for our clientele that had Spanish interest, in the same way we were the referral partner for a lot of their clients that had US interests. But as we start working together and we start seeing a lot of the, same interest in the same target market and sort of same vision in terms of growth and interest in both of our markets, we started seeing that this wasn't the case where 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 3 or 4 or 5, right? Because as we can align visions, and now we have a group of people that are sort of strategically looking at how to help each other grow, it just made sense to have a strategic partnership and really become a partner, right? So that's the yeah. I think the strategic partnership has gone a long way in terms of growth, but it's sort of also elevated kind of how do we look at the organization, and therefore gives you other avenues of growth going forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I mean, choosing so once you get to the point where you think, okay, I think I can really jumpstart the market by entering into a strategic partnership. But I would imagine it's a bit like choosing the right mate when you're getting married, right? So, like, what are some of the factors that businesses need to consider if they're exploring the idea of a strategic partnership like you did?
I think how ready is your organization to do it, right? Or how matured is your organization to do it? And I'm not talking just about my own strategic partnership with a hustle, but I'm also talking about mergers for clientels that we help put together, right? And obviously we do the legal work, but all the business things need to make sense as well, right? And I think the difference between when you have two mature organizations, it doesn't need to be in the same in equal sizes, but I mean more mentally mature organizations of how they want to go about growth together, right? And how do they see their market, and what strengths and weaknesses they see in each other, and how they can leverage both strengths to become a better organization altogether. That's really when it makes sense, because I think we've seen partnerships uh, that they're not as much in equal footing, I would say, in terms of maturity. And that's where I think partnerships that don't work out, where one organization is doing one things one way, the other organization is not. The mentality is not the same, and therefore the culture fit really fails. And I think culture fit is one of the biggest threats when you're having strategic partnerships align, or mergers for that matter, right? So that, I think it comes from a place of how mature the organization and therefore the leaders of the organization are from a business standpoint to make those culture matches work.
Yeah, and I would imagine that that's something, have you having gone through the experience and even just with your legal experience, is that something that you can advise clients on, or is that part of due diligence when, you could become, I guess, a little bit like I'm not going to call it a marriage counselor, or whatever, when you have to go to the pre-marriage training just to make sure that you understand
Right.
what you're getting into. I kind of feel like you need your eyes wide open and get past the honeymoon period into, wait, what does this arrangement really look like, what questions do I need to ask, right?
Right. Absolutely. I do. Is it part of our due diligence necessarily? I'm going to answer probably not, right? We're focused more on the legal side. There's, depending on the business, a lot of times I've seen in transactions where people bring in more, business development or culture coaches, or analysis or analysis team to do that sort of that culture fit, right? And they'll do that sometimes even before we get to the legal due diligence. But
Mm.
we certainly, as attorneys, I think we're advisors, and we are privy to a lot of things that are not just legal, right? We're privy to financial information. I don't pretend to be an accountant or or financial analyst to do a financial due diligence. But the same way that there are certain things that sort of raise red flags sometimes, I think if we see an issue with a potential issue with a culture fit, you may want to bring that up to a client and say, hey, have we thought about these things, right? And what's the plan in place, at least, or what's the strategy in place? Because ultimately, as much as we want to get to the closing table, and technically our job would have ended there in terms of due diligence in an M&A transaction, you want to see clients succeed, you want to see transactions succeed, and more times than not, depending on what side you sit on, you may end up being corporate counsel later on for that business. So you don't want things that you foresaw in during the due diligence period to come up later in time and you didn't say anything about it, right? So
Yeah.
definitely
Don't
comes
want
up.
it to end up in litigation later, so.
Right, exactly.
Now,
Then you're in the middle of it and you're a witness. You don't want to be there.
right. Of course. Now, to be ranked by Law Firm 500 as a fastest growing small law firm in 2023, I'm going to blow you up again here, and shortlisted by Chambers and Partners 2025 are big feats. Now, I've known you for, I think, almost since the beginning, Moises, and I know that you've always been very strong about processes and culture and strategy. So, what are some of those areas, like that structure, that you feel that you build that really supported getting you to this rapid growth?
I appreciate it. Yeah, and actually, this year we just got the news. We got ranked on the Inc. 5000, which I was very proud about that one.
And that's an
South
incredible
Florida Business
accomplishment.
Journal is also ranking us, so It's great, and it's funny because you and I've been working together, and you're gonna roll your eyes when I said that, but I kind of thought all those awards and stuff like that. I was like, I don't need that. Just do your work. And now seeing how important that is from an awareness perspective, right, is definitely important.
It's credibility. It helps you stand out. So I think,
Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah, those are big feats. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Appreciate it. So we're proud of it, and I think two things that I think have helped us get there is definitely internal systems and processes, right? And if I went back 7 years, I would say I would focus on that sooner than I did, right? Because I think that as again, as going back to the growth, as it becomes a bigger organization, right? It's just impossible for, in my case, legal services, right, for me to be the lawyer that's in front of the client, of every client or every matter. If anything, actually, it would be at the service, because that means I wouldn't have my right attention and focus on every client matter. So that means I'm relying now on all those other attorneys and paralegals and staff members that are in front of the clients to communicate to the client the right value system that we have, right, or the right culture, or the right just the way that I would want my team to represent me when they're communicating with clients. And that starts with processes and systems and internal procedures early on, so that the organization is very clear on how we're going to handle certain situations, right? Whatever it is, whether it's a situation or just as simple as delivering a document to a client, right? So that definitely goes a long way to having a very happy or very happy clients, right? Or being very good at, I guess, customer satisfaction. So I'm trying to reach there. I'm sorry. And ultimately, that's going to lead to what? You were talking about organic growth earlier. Really, most of our clientele, I mean, yes, we do marketing, right? And we go to events and we network and whatnot. But the biggest compliment is when we get clients out of clients. And the faster way for us to engage clients that are being referred to us is when they come from somebody that's already worked with us, and they're almost coming in with a guaranteed stamp of approval and saying, go and sign the contract right away, right? So that's focusing on value for our clientele, and focusing on internal processes has been, I think, the key of the fast growth, and therefore how you then start showing up like on all these awards, and start meeting some of these criteria that these organizations start looking at to sort of give you that stamp of approval that this is an organization that is growing, and that it's in the right track and has the right reputation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember you back in the day recording Loom videos and turning them into documents and creating those SOPs. What have you learned is, I guess, the right level of granularity when it comes to documenting what you do as a business? Because there's a certain balance between some things that are unique to how you do things, which I'm assuming you need to document. Some things that are almost, okay, if you're an associate, you should probably know how to do this. So, maybe or maybe not, or maybe I point you to an external resource. And then there's the training, and then there's, how do you, what's the proper way to interact with a client? Like what are the types of things? So, if you're advising a young attorney who is perhaps launching their firm, like what are the types of things that you feel, talking back to younger you, that you would have documented?
That's actually a great question, because I think at one point when I started figuring out that internal processes were important, I almost wanted to document everything to a fault, right? And that became very annoying, because then the rest of the stuff was like, do I need a process to, like, how do I go to the bathroom? Like, what are we talking about here, right?
There's a
So
limit.
it's and then I realized, dial it back a little bit, because well, at the end of the day, we are service providers, and we rely on professionals providing that service. So I do have to give a little bit of discretion or leeway on how and one associate is going to handle, their cases compared to another associate. And attorneys also have different viewpoints, right? If not, we didn't have litigation, right? We're going to look at the same set of facts and maybe give you a different argument a little bit, right? So I think what I really focus on is those things that obviously happen often, or that happen, more than two or three times. You see yourself doing the same things every time. that are more operational, that's when we certainly want to have a policy and procedure, right? And there's certainly certain policies and procedures about the standard of service that we provide, right, or the quality of service that we provide. But then from there, I have to my policy and procedure really becomes how do we train and mold the younger attorneys to become better attorneys and to develop their skills, whether it's advocacy skills, if it's a litigator, or more analytical skills, if it's more of a transactional attorney, right? So I think that the policy procedure then becomes more about career development for the other associates to then become the best version of themselves in terms of attorneys and provide service to the client, because ultimately they're going to develop their own relationship, professional relationship with their clients. And the clients are in large part going to remain in the organization based on the relationship that they develop with that particular attorney. So it has to be a little bit of a leeway there for professional services, that maybe other types of business that sell widgets, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you believe that, you hire someone with the basic skills and then you train them and you kind of mold them in the way that you like to do things, or you bring in someone who is more experienced and maybe requires less training, but also potentially comes with baggage?
Right. That certainly happens. I think that, sorry, sorry. I think when we're talking about somebody that's coming from the outside more in a senior leadership position, I think what we focus the most, in the interview process is how does that person going to fit culturally within the firm, right? And culturally is not just do we see eye to eye on our core values, but even just the way that we do things, right? Is it somebody that's open to that, or is somebody that's coming in with their set ways and we see that's going to be a culture clash, right? So I think that obviously the younger attorneys easier to mold into your own style, takes a little bit longer. Bringing in somebody with leadership definitely has its benefits, but how open do we see it from a culture fit standpoint when you're integrating them?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up culture. Obviously one of the key roles as a leader in any organization, and in your case as a managing partner, is to foster the right kind of culture. So, how do you do that? How do you think about culture at your firm?
I think about it, which is something that I used to not think about before, right? So when I think I was the person mostly running, producing the legal services, and on top of that, obviously running my business, and it was sort of an afterthought, right? You obviously sit down and you think about what are your core values and whatnot, but do you really communicate them? And probably not, because you just operate the way that you operate. A lot of times founders' uh, viewpoints or values really just kind of come ingrained in the business, but we don't really do a good job of communicating and discerning those down to the rest of the team, right? So I think at some point when we had more people and we start seeing people that worked for the organization, or people that just didn't really work for the organization, meaning people that didn't really match with what we were trying to do, is when I started realizing that training people in your culture, or communicating your cultural values become important from the time that you're interviewing somebody, right? I would almost kind of find the person that I needed for a particular spot and didn't even really think about that, and would just stick that person there. And then all of a sudden, they weren't really getting along with your system, or they weren't really getting along with the rest of the organization. And once that happens two, three, four times, you start seeing some common patterns of why that failed, and you start seeing some common patterns on the success stories on why they succeeded, right? And so using that knowledge, now we use that from the minute that we're interviewing somebody, and then from the minute that somebody is first onboarding into the company, and we continue to be very communicative about our culture and our value system to make sure that everybody kind of has that same mentality. So I think culture is a matter of communicating it. It's a matter of looking out for it when you're bringing people in, and it's a matter of, I think, continuing to train the staff to continue to drive that same cultural viewpoint or mentality, right, as we grow.
And do you, as managing partner, do you have final interview on everyone, or does the team, are there some people who join the company and you haven't spoken to them?
No, well, I think I will sit at some point. Actually, I take that back. Maybe some of the administrative team, I don't always meet with those folks, right? I'll leave that more to the administrative team to decide. Um, I think on the attorneys, I will at some point sit with them. So I'm not the first line of defense, if you will, when we are trying to look for a candidate. I think at this point we have somebody that's in charge of hiring, right? And we, as a leadership team, we decide early on what's the right candidate for that position, what are some of the skills that we're looking for, or some of the intangibles. We'll let that the our legal administrator, which is also our head of HR, really kind of go through with the recruiters about what kind of candidates we're looking for and start filtering through the first round of interviews. And they'll really just come to us with the final, two, three, or four picks that we just need to sit and sort of validate, right? So I think at some point in the interview process, but maybe more towards the end, I will be involved in it, especially if it's an attorney. And then on the administrative side, it's just going to depend what kind of employee we're bringing in, right?
So that really then underscores the importance of making sure that, everyone who is doing the interviewing really understands how to ask those cultural fit questions and making
Yes.
sure that you're not making hiring mistakes. So, that's really key. Um,
Absolutely.
Now, as a firm, I know that you've done a lot of work with private equity, you've structured funds, you've worked on tokenization of fractional US real estate, some really innovative, interesting strategies. Could you maybe explain those a little bit to our audience and what those mean for the future of cross border investing?
Yeah. So I think the US, right, still leads as the jurisdiction that other jurisdictions want to invest in, right? And it still leads in terms of capital. And I think you see it from the perspective of, for example, in the startup market. Startups from Latin America that are doing very well will have raised, friends and family round, maybe even a pre-seed or seed series, maybe even a Series A. But ultimately, at some point, they want to come to the United States because of the magnitude of the capital they can raise in the United States, and also because of the magnitude of the market if they're able to sort of sell their services and product to the US, right? So the US still leads it in that. But what I think tokenization and innovation has done, and really just globalization of economies, right, has done is that it's given access to more people, maybe even sooner than they would have, right? Tokenization is a great example. Or tokenization of real estate is a great example of how you're taking an industry that was dominated probably by investors of a certain net worth type level, right? Or institutions. And now you're giving access to everybody, right? Depending on the type of platform you're investing in. So it gives access to everybody to invest in real estate. So you don't have to wait to have $100,000 in the bank to make a real estate investment, or if you're in the Miami market, that wouldn't even get you in the door, right? But now with globalization of economy and access to market that makes it simpler, like tokenization through blockchain, now you do have access to those markets. So I think what's important for us is we're looking at market trends and we're looking at products that are coming in the market, and understanding what could kind of do, all right, on in our case, in the private equity sector, right, in terms of opportunities of investment, and monitor without necessarily having to be an expert. I'm not an expert in tokenization and blockchain, right? From the operational standpoint, I mean, right? At this point, it's become such an important factor in terms of investments that I would say I am an expert, right, on the security side of it. So I think that as we started seeing that market trend grow, and you started seeing that market is here to stay, it's not something that is going to that just spiked 1 year and it's going to disappear. I think it's important for us as attorney that we continue to adapt, right? As economies adapt and things come up in the market. So I think that's been sort of that example of getting involved in investments that maybe 4 years ago weren't a reality or weren't accessible for a lot of the private equity market.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And so let's say you're someone is a Latin American investor or entrepreneur, I'll put it that way. So when they're trying to enter the US market, what are some of the pitfalls they should be aware of that that may perhaps they might not have thought about? Because I think a lot of people look at, as you mentioned, this is the market where a lot of people want to be. It's the land of opportunity. Um, but it's not without risk. What should they have their eyes open for?
I think whether they understand the market and whether they're ready for the market, right? And a great example is of a potential client of ours and I say potential because we ended up not engaging in the representation because we didn't think they were ready, right? It was a company that had a little bit of success in their home country, but they just saw the dollar signs in the US of saying, if I sell this much here, I can sell that much in the US. But they wanted to come in with a system that is just the way that we run things back home. And never really had a business plan, didn't even understand the market segment that we're getting into or how competitive it was. So it really gave us a lot of red flags and pause in terms of do you do you have a business plan on how you're going to develop this in the US? And if you do, great, let's work off that. And obviously, business plans are never perfect, right? I think anybody expanding to a different jurisdiction is going to come across to some challenges, and you adapt and you grow from there. But in this case, this potential client scared us a little bit because we felt that it came with no preparation whatsoever and wasn't even looking to adapt to the market. He was just going to interpose his business model in the US market. And it wasn't an innovative business of something that it hasn't been done in the US, right? You're coming into a market that already exists. So how are you going to survive in that market? So I think that understanding the market and whether you're ready, again, from an organizational standpoint, to come in is important because the one thing that I tell a lot of my clients from Latin America is the US is great to start businesses and be entrepreneurial and grow a business and scale. Um, but it also but it's mistakes cost a lot of money also in the US, right? So it could be your downfall as well. So I think that's one of the biggest key points we stress when we're dealing with a new client.
Yeah, that makes sense. And curious to get your take also on the current M&A climate. I mean, I know that we're not exactly sitting in the best economic conditions right at the moment. There's a lot of volatility. What should leaders be thinking about today if they're on the buy side or if they're on the sell side? What are you seeing out there?
Well, so you said it right. The market's a bit dry to a certain degree. And dry, I'm going to say on volume of transactions, not necessarily in dollars of transactions, right? I think that people are being a bit more cautious on what transactions they get into. Due diligence are becoming a little bit more rigorous, which that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think uh, 3 4 years ago when the market had really boomed in M&A, at some point it became almost crazy on what we were trading on, right? So due diligence have actually gotten more rigorous, but that's a good thing. And I think companies need to evaluate whether it makes sense and what am I really buying into, right? But I think in terms of recommendation, I think I think people are a little bit hesitant right now because there is a lot of market uncertainty and there's a lot of volatility. Um, but I do think that there's people sitting and waiting and thinking that that's gonna sort of settle out a little bit heading into fourth quarter of this year, and are going to start seeing a little bit more uptick in transactions, probably not quarter four, but maybe quarter one of 2026, right? So I think there is capital. It's just people are being reserved on how they spend it or when is the right time to spend it. So I think
Yeah,
it's going to be a matter of time.
yeah, a little money's a little bit on the sidelines right now. And
Exactly.
But I mean, as soon as we see that start to come into the market, that'll be a good sign in general for all business. So I think that's hopefully I'm happy to hear you say that you think it could be as soon as Q4 or Q1. So hopefully we'll see.
I would hope so, but then again, maybe I'm being a little optimist, but I think so. I think that even I think the market volatility is what's caused the delay on capital entering this year. We all thought that the M&A sector was going to get a little more active towards the end of quarter 2, right? But obviously that didn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't think any podcast episode would be complete without talking about AI. So
Okay.
talk about AI. So AI is obviously disrupting pretty much every type of business, every industry that you can imagine. How are you using AI in your practice, and how are you seeing that it's impacting business in terms of your clients?
I mean, I think everybody's starting to use AI, right, in one form or another. I would say that I was maybe a little bit of a late adopter in our firm. We obviously had some of the associates using it themselves, but in terms of as a business, right, we were a little bit of a late adopter, and I think the same is happening generally. I think you'll have a lot of people that have come around and say, okay, this is a tool. How can I use it to help my business? And some people maybe are still a little reluctant, but are going to come around soon because undoubtedly, I think AI is changing the way we do business, and it's there really to facilitate as a tool, right? It's not to replace. So I think that we've even heard a few horror stories of litigators just researching law on AI or on ChatGPT and then coming to court, and then it's not really, they're giving bad information. So like everything, tools need to be molded, right? AI is going to continue to improve and get better. I can tell you that as a starting point, there are some AI platforms now, legal AI platforms, that I will say, hey, they're a really good starting point, especially if you're a young associate. I mean, I started practicing. I still have to go to the library in the county courthouse, right, and pick out the books and kind of
You're
and
dating
spend
yourself a
three
little
hours to just get the right lead of the issue that I needed to start researching, right?
bit,
So
right?
that's it. This is cutting everybody's research time in more than half, right? On the M&A side, for example, there's now a couple of platforms that are really powerful in terms of helping attorneys go through due diligence, right? So I think a lot of people are saying or are scared, saying, well, that you're replacing an associate's job because now the AI can do a lot of what the associate would do during the due diligence process. Well, I would say that's incorrect, because now you have, instead of being able to manage 2 transactions with the same workforce you had, now that same team can be handling 4 transactions and using the tool to get ahead during the due diligence process, right? And some of these platforms are pretty interesting in terms of not just picking up on things that the system is seeing in due diligence, but even advising you a little bit of how that may be favorable for a buyer or a seller, how that's neutral on a contract or is not neutral on a contract, and maybe kind of what the industry standard is. And it gives you that starting point of saying, okay, let me look into that further. And then obviously you at the end of the day are the legal counselor, are the advocate, and making sure that that makes sense for your client for the particular transaction. So the same way that I think it's affecting my practice is going to affect business in general. And I think we need to embrace it as a tool to help us provide a better service.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think that what's interesting is there's a lot of, I think businesses are also waking up now to the idea of the privacy and security aspects of AI. And so, putting some sort of an AI policy in place. And then I'm assuming, so now, if you're sort of thinking from an attorney's point of view, you're really retrofitting all of this, because you have some companies who are just like, we're not going to allow, you can't use AI at all, and then others it's kind of a free for all. But what data are your employees just uploading to ChatGPT and asking questions? Are you potentially exposing anything from a privacy perspective? Are there IP exposure? So what's your take on all of that? What would be a good starting roadmap for businesses to consider in order to try to protect their information in
Yeah,
the
I mean, obviously, depending on the business you are and how sensitive the information that you manage is, right? I think the first thing is what kind of platform you're using and what security is embedded within it, right? I wouldn't say that I would never upload client documents maybe to an open AI platform like ChatGPT. If let's say that I use a due diligence AI platform, right? Maybe in that sense, depending on what are the security measures that that platform has taken, you would say, okay, I feel comfortable enough to use that, and I would have particular guidelines and policies. We have implemented policies already in the firm. How do we use client information with AI? But if let's say I am going to go more to Chat GPT, right? Look, I one of our policies is you never put client information, whether it's names, personal information, documents, never upload it. Can you use it to say, give AI hypotheticals that will kind of at least lead you in the right direction on a particular legal issue? Maybe, right? But never put personal information up there unless it's a platform that you can feel secure, that we as an organization feel good about how secure it is, right? So yes, I think there has to be certain policies in place, at least right now, because we're still just very unsure to a certain degree, right? How secure these platforms are, and I think they will continue to evolve and make it more and more secure, and then maybe we'll feel more comfortable. But I think in the meantime, for our business, we handle confidential information. We certainly have to get ahead of that instead of being reactive to that, right?
course. That's what I'm thinking is, either you're because you're bound by confidentiality or you've signed an NDA or what. I mean, you could easily expose your business, or one of your employees could expose your business unwittingly. So that education piece, and I'm assuming going back and things like retrofitting employment agreements and all of that to make sure that everyone understands what the limitations are is important. So obviously, Moises, just as we're kind of getting close to the end here, as you're looking back and as you're kind of thinking of maybe advice you would have given yourself if you were just starting out, maybe they're a young Hispanic or lawyer, they're interested in entrepreneurship, they're looking to expand in the U.S. What's one key piece of advice you think you would give to somebody just starting out?
The key piece of advice somebody starting out is surround yourself with people, right? Surround yourself with people that are hopefully people that are smarter than you, right? And surround yourself with people with experience. And it doesn't have to be in your same industry. I thought that it's necessarily the one lawyer that needs to be your mentor, right? I can now say through my career, there's different lawyers that I look up to that have been mentors for different things or different reasons, right? And then there's other business people that are not even lawyers that I've just learned a lot from in business. Um, but I think that we all take for granted a little bit, or another word, we have busy lives and we're thinking, in my case, I could say if I am not in a business development meeting or a coffee with a potential referral source or a client meeting or doing legal work, I'm wasting my time. Well, no, sometimes, right? Talking to other peers and businesses that are more or less in the same growth trajectory as you are, even if it's a different industry, just having conversations about where you are really sparks different ideas of what would you do better, or even learning from somebody else's experience. I actually don't agree. People say that we all learn just by trial and error. I don't agree with that. I think sometimes we can learn by other people's trials and errors, right?
Right. Like, I make all the same mistakes,
Yeah,
right?
like if you get a riddle, that's only going to work on you once. But after you've learned it, now that riddle doesn't work on you the next time, right? And you know the answer. So same thing. I mean, get information. And for some people, that's even reading, right? Books about particular subject that could work. But for me, I would say surrounding myself with like-minded entrepreneurs, like-minded lawyers, I think is the thing that I would have done more of in my younger self if I was starting
I think
again.
that's great advice. All right, Moises, lightning round. What is one book that every entrepreneur should read?
Power of Habit.
By, do you happen to know the author?
Shoot.
We'll look it up. We'll put it in the show
I will
notes.
have to look it up.
Favorite productivity hack?
Block calendar.
Ooh, good. I like that one. I do that one too. What is your top tip for balancing work, leadership, and your personal life, assuming you want to have one?
Block calendar.
I love it. Okay, even in your personal life. All right, good to know.
Yes, it sounds weird, but the more that I can have structure, the better.
Like, all right, I'm sorry, I can't have dinner yet. It's not my calendar. All right.
Some flexibility.
Okay. What is something that most people don't know about your day to day that might surprise them?
I take a 10-minute nap every single day in the middle of the day.
Good for you. Wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
don't tell my staff though. I
Okay, all
pretend
right.
that I'm on a Zoom call. I close my door. I turn the light off. I put on a timer for 10 minutes, and I just close my eyes for 10 minutes, and it just recharges me.
My
It gives me
grandfather
back.
lived to be almost 100, and I swear it was the cat naps.
Yeah, I know.
They're so helpful.
Maybe because this partnership with the Spanish law firm, and I'm really trying to bring the siesta back to some degree. But
Okay, all right. I
you know,
think we should reinstate the siesta. I'm all for it, and we'll start a petition.
well, not for the rest of the staff. I'll reinstate it for me.
Okay, gotcha. All right, and lastly, what is next for Saltiel Law Group as you target maybe more practice areas or emerging markets?
Yeah, so that's where it started a little bit, right? I think we wanted to become a full service business law firm, and I think we have for the most part, right? But then we wanted to start adding some practice areas that are complementary that make sense. So we just brought in a tax partner, and now we have a tax practice within the firm. We want to bring in, I think, a real estate division and potentially a business immigration division, right? So in terms of divisions, those are the next two we're looking for. But we're also looking to start expanding our office footprint. So I think probably not this year, but in the coming year or beginning of 2027, we want to start branching to a couple of different states that we have in mind and start growing the law firm, again, expanding law firm through the US, right?
All right, Moises. So thank you so much for being on this episode with me. I think it was really, really educational. And if the listeners would like to reach out to you, what's the best place that they can find you?
Sure. LinkedIn is always an easy place to find me, but also our website, www.saltiellawgroup.com.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Moises. Enjoyed having you.
Thank you for having me.